And we are live. I am your host, Gentleman Ian of Spoiler Free Wrestling. And if you're new to these videos, here's what we are trying to do for you. And this all comes from numerous people I've spoken to, friends who are wrestling fans, but they don't like following wrestling media. They don't go to the dirt sheets. They don't go to various websites and things like that, because when you do that, you inevitably get spoilers for different shows. The big example that I've been using recently is if you followed the dirt sheets leading up to the Royal Rumble, you knew Ronda Rousey was going to be an unannounced, unadvertised member of the Royal Rumble. And you would have just enjoyed it as a surprise. Same thing with matches that are scheduled for WrestleMania. Those are all over the wrestling news websites right now. So if you don't want to know what those are, you have to avoid those wrestling websites. So what we're trying to do is to be an alternative for fans who feel this way, who want to get all the wrestling news, but don't want to have the shows spoiled for them, don't want to know, don't want to know what the matches are going to be ahead of time, what the angles are going to be ahead of time, that kind of thing. So, in these videos and on SpoilerFreeWrestling.com, I'm going to run down everything that's making news in the world of professional wrestling today, but I omit any information which could potentially spoil the shows for you, so you get all the wrestling news you want, but just with those spoilers removed. And so far, a lot of people really enjoy this type of coverage. If you're one of those people who enjoys this type of coverage, I'd like to encourage you to subscribe to this YouTube channel. Click the like button and share this video with anyone who you feel would also enjoy this type of wrestling coverage. Also check us out at SpoilerFreeWrestling.com. So, last night was AEW Dynamite, and there was a lot of news coming out of AEW Dynamite this week. But I think we will start with kind of a rather unfortunate story regarding Brian Kendrick. And this, of course, is up at SpoilerFreeWrestling.com. So, earlier this week, it had been announced that Brian Kendrick had been granted his release from WWE. This is something that he'd been trying to get for as many as 6 weeks. He finally got it on the same day the news broke that he had received his release from WWE. It was announced that he was going to face Jon Moxley in this week's Dynamite. Now, there's a wrestling reporter by the name of David Bixenspan. And David Bixenspan, I don't know if he specializes in this, but a lot of his articles, a lot of his work kind of like exposes things that wrestlers did, people in the wrestling industry did that are not good. Like, he focuses on bad things that wrestlers or wrestling companies, executives, so-and-so have done. So, for instance, he was very big in getting the news out about Drake Wuertz, who was a referee in NXT, and he kind of exposed Drake Wuertz some rather unsavory social media posts that he had put out. So Bixenspan does this deep dive into Brian Kendrick and found some really unfortunate stuff. Some really, they're ridiculous comments, but they're also like really hateful comments. So you don't want to write them off just because they are ridiculous, because they're still hateful. I'm not gonna go into too deep what Brian Kendrick said, but videos surfaced of Kendrick making comments from about 8 years ago. He talked a lot about various conspiracy theories revolving around 9/11, Sandy Hook, the Holocaust, and when kind of word broke and some of these videos got shared online, Tony Khan put out a statement, which is up on your screen now. Tony Khan said, "We've been made aware of abhorrent and offensive comments made in the past by Brian Kendrick. There's no room in AEW for the views expressed by Brian. We think it's best for all that Brian be pulled from tonight's card as we gather more info. We'll announce a replacement bout ASAP." And it was eventually announced that Wheeler Yuta from the Best Friends would replace Brian Kendrick in this match. That match would actually open up the show. Brian Kendrick then released a statement on social media stating, "I apologize for all the hurt and embarrassment I have caused with my words. These are not my beliefs and never were beliefs of mine, and I crossed the line. I spread the most vile comments without thinking of the damage it would cause. I will live with this regret for the rest of my life. I am truly sorry for the pain I have caused." So kind of up on your screen, I don't really feel the need to go over too much of this, but this is all up at spoilerfreewrestling.com. Some of the different things that Brian Kendrick said. Now, whether he was, trying to be an edgy character or are these actual thoughts of his, there's some debate can be had as to that. But really, I mean, if you're in 2022 and there's videos of you saying some of these things, it's going to be pretty hard for you to have a career that's in the public spotlight, So Brian Kendrick was pulled. I don't imagine, I don't really know what's going to happen to Brian Kendrick here. AEW's kind of big on, I don't want to say cancel culture or anything. I don't want to say anything loaded about that. Here are my thoughts on cancel culture. There's some very good parts about it, and there's some very bad parts about it. It's one of those things where you can't really, it's not really possible to whittle it down to either it's good or bad, right? It's just a case of with social media now everybody can, information spreads so much faster. People can band together based on their opinions to certain information. And so if, in the case of guys like Brian Kendrick, if there's video of people making hateful comments, I mean, that's just going to make it very difficult to have a career in a public business like professional wrestling is. So I don't know what's going to happen with Brian Kendrick. But if you look at some of the wrestlers that have sort of had a backlash against them for things that they've done in the past, but do have something to offer wrestling, because they're take Tessa Blanchard, for example. Tessa Blanchard is a very good wrestler, but Tessa Blanchard made enough enemies backstage in wrestling that she's kind of been blacklisted. She's going to be in that Women of Wrestling, or sort of that the latest Glow reboot kind of thing, but Tessa Blanchard, if we were going strictly on wrestling ability, would be in one of the major wrestling companies right now, earning a nice paycheck. But there's all this stuff out there about her, and some people have raised some real red flags about her behavior, and now she's not working anywhere. And unfortunately, I don't know if it's unfortunate or not, to be honest, but Brian Kendrick now finds himself in the same boat. So he was replaced by Wheeler Yuta in a match against Jon Moxley, and I thought that was a pretty good match. All right, turning into the chat here. Let's see what we got. If they saved Sasha for the Royal Rumble, maybe. They didn't save a lot of surprises for the Royal Rumble. They I think they were trying to sell so many tickets that they let those surprises out, right? Because in past years, you wouldn't announce that Mickie James was going to be in the Royal Rumble. She'd just show up in the Royal Rumble. But and of course the Ronda Rousey news leaked early. We wouldn't have reported on that, but they didn't announce Ronda Rousey was going to be in it. But yeah, so I mean, I don't know. Bro, Twitter thought Killer Kross was going to be Moxley's opponent because of Kross recently knew. Oh, yeah, well, okay, so something that we talked about in a previous video, the wrestlers who were released from WWE in November are just about finished their 90-day no-compete clause. So, Killer Kross, Karrion Kross, he's free to be wherever. So, I'm sure there were some people that thought Kross was going to be brought in. Kross and Moxley worked together on the Indies before Kross went to NXT. And so I think they like working with each other. I don't know if Karrion Kross is somebody who's going to show up in AEW. I don't know. It's tough, right? Like, if he'd been one of the first ones released when WWE decided that they were going to really release a lot of guys, I think they would have picked him up. But there's less spots available on AEW's roster now. Tony Khan has said, we have to be a little bit more choosy in who we bring in. And I think Karrion Kross, like, he's a great character. I don't know if he's as good of a wrestler as they like in AEW. Like, AEW has a lot of really, really good wrestlers. And Kross has actually only been wrestling for so long. Like, he was... Because he wrestled a little bit in AAA, right, in Mexico. Then he wrestled a little bit in Impact, and then he was in NXT. He's not, like, a veteran or anything. He's still at the beginning stage. Well, I mean... He's been wrestling now for a few years, but that's not that long. But Kross is a big deal in AAA. Like, Conan really likes him. Apparently, he got over really well there. Athena Moon, yeah, she's a free agent now, and she announced her first match back is going to be for Warrior Wrestling in Chicago. She's going to face Thunder Rosa on a show upcoming. So that's cool. But you have to wonder, like, where is Ember Moon going to show up? Or Athena? I think, like, AEW's got to sign her, right? Like, she's too good of a wrestler and too experienced. And AEW is... I mean, they're better now than they had been, but they've been sort of lacking that experience in the women's division. And they bring in Serena Deeb, and that really helps quite a bit, having someone like her. And she's now working backstage as a producer for the women's division. So that's pretty big. But they need more still, right? Like bringing in an Ember Moon, I think, would be good. I'd like to see them bring in Taya Valkyrie. That would be cool. Let's see. Mia Yim was on Twitch last night, and I love how she's playing the free agent Moon. Yeah. Yeah, so, I mean, let me know in the chat where you think Mia Yim might go. She's engaged to Keith Lee, and so maybe she goes to the same place. Like, if I'm Keith Lee and I'm going into AEW, like I'm negotiating my contract with Tony Khan, I'm going to try and get Mia Yim in as well, right? And there's another wrestling couple that is in the same sort of boat. And that's now Juice Robinson and Tony Storm. Juice Robinson's New Japan Pro Wrestling contract ran out on January 31st. Tony Storm asked for her release from WWE in late December. So now both Juice and Tony... Actually, Tony's still probably got like a couple of months before she's free to go anywhere. But Juice Robinson and Tony Storm are now like a couple that could be brought in. And again, for AEW, like AEW is so stacked in their men's division, but not really in their women's. Still, like they still need more stars in their women's division. I think they have to sign Tony Storm. Like Tony Storm's a really good wrestler. People like her. You need more in your women's division. You know, AEW needs to use the people they have now, like Joey Janela. Yeah. Joey Janela is, I mean, he's on Dark. He wrestled on Dark this week. He wrestled Lee Moriarty, I want to say. And he actually lost. So the rumor with Joey Janela is that he might not get his contract renewed when it comes up in May. I don't know if that's true or not. Like, the people that haven't been renewed, they're not using them at all. Joey gets used, right? Like, he's on Dark. He's not on Dynamite or Rampage. But he does stuff. So, Access TV is a rock channel, and as far as I know, they are not happy with the ratings there. What, for New Japan or for Impact? Access TV, well, Impact had their best ratings in almost a year for their last show, which was the first show they did after Mickie James was announced for the Royal Rumble. The New Japan rating, I think, was just like 66,000 watched it or something this week, so it wasn't like a big... They haven't been doing like big ratings for New Japan. But I guess that was part of the deal New Japan had has with Access TV. Oh, they're not happy with the Impact ratings? Yeah, so the thing is, Impact is the highest rated show on Access TV, but obviously I think they would like those ratings to be better. But I think it's important to note, like, Impact's main... Yeah, well, yeah, of course. I mean, they want to get up, closer to what they had been doing. And especially because they had that ratings bump when Kenny Omega came in and they were doing all that stuff. But, like, they get these little spikes, but then they can't maintain it, right? Like, it's like, okay, we got this little bump of interest because of Mickie James. We got this little bump of interest because of Kenny Omega. Impact did some good ratings while it was on Spike TV. But, Access TV is sort of a smaller channel. The other thing with Impact is they are owned by Anthem Sports and Entertainment, which is a Canadian company. And Anthem Sports and Entertainment also owns Access TV. They bought it, like, not too long ago. Anthem also owns the Fight Network, which is, I don't believe it's on the United States. It's on here in Canada. It's on worldwide. But it's a specialty channel that, like, satellite and cable companies can add to different packages. So a lot of what their business is trying to get satellite and cable companies to purchase the Fight Network. And with Impact being the highest rated show on the Fight Network, their business becomes less about television ratings, although those are important, but definitely less about television ratings in the United States and more about getting international deals for the Fight Network. And not so much like Impact based, but more about promoting the Fight Network and different Anthem Sports and Entertainment properties. Also, they have a really financially lucrative television deal in India. I'm assuming that deal is still going on. All right. But that was a lot about whatever. Let's get back into some of the news. Okay, so I think we've covered everything with Brian Kendrick. He made a bunch of comments that were horrible. And a video of him saying these really horrible comments popped up recently. The thing is, like, those videos never popped up while he was in WWE, but he gets announced for this high-profile match for AEW. Then they do pop up, and, So it is one of these things where, like, some people who could easily be canceled are just, like, flying under the radar because nobody's paying attention to them. But we'll see. We'll see if anything happens from that. Like, Tony Khan's tweet said, we're going to wait till we have more info. So to me, that would imply, like, he's going to make another comment about Kendrick at some point. But, maybe he won't. Maybe they'll just let it go, and we'll never hear about Kendrick again. So, but aside from the Brian Kendrick stuff, I think the biggest news that came out of AEW Dynamite last night was that MJF defeated CM Punk. And I think some people were really surprised by this. I wasn't. I thought there was a totally good chance that MJF could defeat CM Punk. Because, one, they protect MJF pretty well. Like, MJF, he cheats to win, but he wins the vast majority of his matches. Also, if you're going to have CM Punk lose, having him lose in Chicago is, like, the best idea. Because they've done 100 shows in Chicago over the last, like, when was that, the show they did in the United Center when CM Punk came back? Like, when did he come back? I can't remember. But they've done, like, 5 trips to Chicago since. And they sold a considerably lower amount of tickets for this show. They sold under 6,000 tickets for the show last night. Granted, I mean, there was, like, horrible weather problems and stuff, but... so it is one of these things of, like, okay, well, maybe they've run Chicago so much that, like, a percentage of the fans who are buying tickets are now like, I don't think we're going to buy tickets to this thing anymore. So MJF They did I couldn't believe it. They started the ring introductions for this match at like 9:12. The entire match went about 40 minutes. It was a very old school match. They did a lot of old school spots. Like, they did a spot early in the match where MJF was tied up in the ropes, and Punk would punch him, and then MJF would fall back because he's in between the ropes, and then he'd come forward and Punk would punch him again. That's like a spot from the 1970s. I don't think anybody has done that, at least since the 1980s. So they did a lot of old school stuff in this, but like MJF is very influenced by old school wrestling, and so is CM Punk. So now we got to ask ourselves, what's next in the CM Punk MJF storyline? Is this it? Was that the like blow off? Like MJF's going to go on and challenge Hangman Page, and CM Punk's going to move on to another feud, or do you go back and do like a gimmick match at AEW Revolution, the next pay-per-view? I don't know. They're probably only, who knows when we'll find that out. I guess next week on Dynamite we'll know a lot more. But I thought that was pretty noticeable. Also newsworthy stuff that came out of Dynamite last night. So following Jon Moxley defeating Wheeler Yuta, Bryan Danielson comes out in the same t-shirt he's worn since he left WWE. And he said, these fans might want us to fight, but I really want us to team up. We could run this place. And so the idea is, Bryan Danielson is offered to align with Jon Moxley. Told him, don't answer tonight, don't answer tonight. Think it over. And we'll decide another time. So this is going to be like an ongoing thing. Like, we'll find out Jon Moxley's answer to Bryan Danielson in the next couple of weeks. And either he's going to accept his offer, and we're going to see Moxley and Bryan Danielson as a team, or he's going to turn it down. We're going to see Bryan Danielson and Jon Moxley fight each other. Either of those things are completely fine with me. Nyla Rose defeated Ruby Soho last night as well. So it was a bad night for punks in wrestling. It was, they both lost. There was only 4 matches on AEW Dynamite this week, and 2 of them involved punk rockers losing. But, so Nyla Rose beat Ruby Soho, mainly due to interference from Vicky Guerrero. But Lars Frederiksen was in attendance, and I just wanted to put this up on your screen for a little bit. So he just wrote, had the pleasure of watching the super duper talented Ruby Soho from AEW tonight live in Chicago. So honored as the rest of the boys in Rancid are to be her entrance music. First time meeting in person. Really. What a great night. Thanks to everyone for the hospitality. And so kind of a rough loss for Ruby Soho, She's that's her 3rd loss since coming to AEW, maybe even more than that. She lost to Britt Baker in a title match. She lost to Jade Cargill. Yeah, she made it to the finals of the tournament, TBS tournament. Then she lost to Jade Cargill, and now she loses to Nyla Rose as well. This was maybe just a way to get Nyla Rose her win back, as Soho had defeated her in the semifinals of the TBS tournament. So cool stuff from Lars Frederiksen there. Other stuff coming out of AEW Dynamite. So Paige Van Zant. So Brandy Rhodes came out and just got crapped on by the live crowd. And she did a promo battle with Dan Lampert from American Top Team that, Brandy and Lambert, they're both pretty good at landing some solid shots there. Like Brandy told Ethan Page that the only reason they hired him was to get to Josh Alexander. I thought that was a pretty good line. Dan Lambert is, you either love him or you hate him, but if you love him, you really like Dan Lambert, and sometimes he's really good. So Paige Van Zant came out and they did a pull apart between Van Zant and Brandy. So now you have to wonder, okay, are we going to get a match between those two coming up? So outside of Dynamite, the big news continues to be about Shane McMahon. Before we get to that, however, I'll just check if there's any more questions in the chat. I know Khan was trying to have it seem like Punk was going to win, but went by curveball. Yeah, totally. Because that's why they did that sort of false finish there. Like halfway through the match, MJF chokes CM Punk out, but he's got like some type of foreign object he used to choke him. The ref calls for the bell because Punk's out, but then when he lifts MJF's arm out, the foreign object falls out and they restart the match. And that's what I thought too. Is like, you're going into this match thinking like maybe MJF can win it, But when they did that finish where MJF won, but then they reversed it, well, how often did they reverse a decision, but then the same guy wins later on? Hardly ever. I don't know if it's ever happened. So them doing that was kind of a way to just, it was like a red herring. It was to make us think that MJF isn't going to win, has no chance to win, and we're going to get the feel-good CM Punk story. So yeah, totally it was a curveball. Also, the other curveball was all the stuff with Wardlow. Because in the end, Wardlow helped MJF. We were led to believe that Wardlow was about to turn on MJF imminently. But what happened is he came out, he handed MJF the diamond ring, and he distracted the ref, and MJF, he did a perfect job helping MJF win the match. So that was another little screwball they threw at us to make us think that Punk was going to win. Okay, so on Shane McMahon will go to AEW Wrestling to tick off Vince McMahon and the dead WWE from... Okay, so yes, lots of people are saying, what about Shane McMahon going to AEW? And at first glance, you're like, but WWE's his family's company. Yes, but Shane's been kind of, first of all, when he was younger, Shane probably assumed he was the heir apparent to Vince McMahon. Then he grows older, and Stephanie McMahon is more in that role. She gets married to Triple H. Triple H is in that role. All of a sudden, you thought you were taking over WWE, but you're not. It's your sister and her husband. And there was an old WWE referee who did a podcast and said that back when Hunter and Stephanie were first getting together, that Shane McMahon was very vocally opposed to Stephanie dating any wrestlers, and this caused a real rift between Shane and Triple H, and that ultimately led to Shane leaving the company for a period. So, Shane's got if he doesn't have resentment towards WWE to some regard, especially now considering everything that's happened, maybe... I don't know. The idea of Shane wanting to go to AEW doesn't seem far-fetched. But apparently people have reached out to Tony Khan to let them know that he should be a little weary of bringing in Shane McMahon. So up on your screen now is an article from WrestlingNews.co. It says, people in WWE reportedly want to warn Tony Khan about out-of-control Shane McMahon. And so this is coming from comments made by Wade Keller of PWTorch.com. So let's just scroll down here. So yes, the fake meme graphics are out saying Shane is all elite. Tony Khan may or may not reach out to Shane. I don't know. I don't think he will, just because it's Vince's son. But anyway, Keller continued. People in WWE are letting me know that someone should warn Tony Khan what he's in for if he brings Shane in. So there's definitely people in WWE who think the idea of Shane McMahon popping up in AEW is not far-fetched, like it could happen. They're warning Tony Khan what he's in for if he brings Shane in because of the sense of entitlement, and I don't know if ego is the right word, that Shane would bring along with him in a company that isn't WWE would probably be amplified compared to how he was acting on Saturday, which was just basically out of control. So yeah, the latest on what Shane McMahon was up to at the Royal Rumble was that Shane really wanted to push his planned angle. I won't say with who, because it could potentially be a spoiler if it happens, but Shane had a planned angle for WrestleMania. He wanted it to start in the Royal Rumble. So he wanted the Royal Rumble to kind of be booked around that angle. Brock Lesnar, obviously he lost the title, and then he's coming in at the number 30 spot and winning it. So there was Brock Lesnar wanted certain stuff, and so Vince ended up siding with the Brock camp and not so much with the Shane camp. And Shane is said to have reacted fairly unprofessionally to this, so much so that Shane is now gone from the company. He's not going to be in the Elimination Chamber, and he's not going to be in WrestleMania. So, it's kind of unfortunate news. Like to a certain extent, I kind of feel bad for Shane. I mean, this is his company, right? Or his family's company, and he's been ousted from it again. So it just kind of sucks. So first he leaves WWE because he's not the heir apparent anymore, and he wants to go strike it out on his own. And so he was involved in that company that was trying to get streaming services in China. And I don't even think they brought in $1 of revenue. So that wasn't successful. Then he comes back and he does some wrestling, and it's fine for a little bit, but then everybody kind of gets tired of him, and then this happens. I have sympathy for Shane McMahon. Obviously, I don't know how he was acting backstage. The reports are he was acting very unprofessionally. But I guess to a certain extent, I don't know. I just have some sympathy for Shane McMahon, kind of the way that he's sort of gotten the shaft in his family a little bit. So that's kind of unfortunate news. All right, let's see what else is making headlines in the world of professional wrestling today. Oh, yeah. So Sean Waltman did an interview with Sports Illustrated. And so Sean Waltman, he hasn't wrestled since 2019, but he's gotten himself in really good shape. He's recovering from some type of ACL injury. And so he's ready to return to wrestling. And he appeared on the GCW pay-per-view, the World on GCW pay-per-view. And he's now getting involved in a program with Matt Cardona on that show. So that's kind of cool. So he's going to be doing that. But according to comments that he made to Sports Illustrated, he let WWE know, hey, I'm available for the Royal Rumble. I could be a surprise appearance in the Royal Rumble. And evidently WWE was just not interested. So here's the quote of what he said about the Royal Rumble. Waltman said, as far as the Royal Rumble, I gave them a heads up I'd be ready if they wanted me. I wasn't actively campaigning for it. I wasn't going to do that, but I let them know, and I guess they weren't interested. So, why would WWE not be... the Royal Rumble is all about surprises. If you've got an in-shape X-Pac ready to go, why not have him go? So I was a little surprised by that. And if he's doing the stuff for GCW, that probably means he didn't get much interest from AEW about a comeback either. So, well, maybe. Who knows? Who knows if we'll see him in AEW or not. But he's doing some stuff for GCW, and I think that'll be cool. There's some other quotes in this article, which I thought were interesting. So, Waltman said, I did pretty well in this industry when I wasn't clear-headed. So think of what I can do with a healthy mind and healthy body. I don't know how many matches I have left in me, so I'm going to go out there and have some great effing matches. He also said, I want to go out on my terms. My last matches, I was going through the greatest hits. It was all nostalgia. This is going to be different. And just some stuff about what he's doing. Yeah, so X-Pac and Joey Janela are going to team up to take on Matt Cardona and Brian Myers. That is going to be on the February 25th show from Los Angeles. So X-Pac doing some stuff in GCW, wanted to do some stuff in WWE, but evidently they were not interested. All right. What else is making headlines in the world of professional wrestling today? We mentioned this a little bit earlier, but Ember Moon is returning to professional wrestling. She was released on November 4th, so her 90 days finished yesterday or the day before. She's, I don't know if she's going by Athena Moon or her name Athena Palmer, but she's going to wrestle Thunder Rosa for the Warrior Wrestling Women's Championship on February the 12th. And she's now free to show up in any promotion that would want her. Also free to show up in any promotion that may want him is Juice Robinson. And this is according to an article from Fightful. And also, Juice mentioned this in a conversation he had with Justin Barrasso of Sports Illustrated. His contract was up on January 31st. He hasn't wrestled for New Japan Pro Wrestling in Japan since last March. He is looking to test the waters of free agency and see what offers he gets. He's been wrestling in Impact and New Japan Pro Wrestling's the New Japan of USA promotion, which is sometimes more entertaining than New Japan Pro Wrestling. It is also said he can still appear for New Japan Pro Wrestling. He just might do so without a contract. And, alright, so that's Juice Robinson. He's free to show up where he wants. And just last thing, and then we'll get into the lineup for Impact tonight. So Ken Anderson, so the former, what was his name in WWE? Ken Kennedy? So he has a wrestling school, and they've had issues with, obviously with COVID-19 stuff. And I guess he decided to push back reopening because of the new variants and things like that. So one of his students or someone who had signed up to take part in classes posted to Reddit saying, Anderson's gone silent and his only update every 2 to 3 months is that they're in talks with a realtor for a new facility, but no real progress comes out of it. Students have now been enrolled for close to 2 years with no training in sight, not even remote homework like tape study, character development, or promos. His official website for the school has since gone down, which doesn't help the situation or convey a good message. This kind of reminds me of Bryan Danielson's story of training with training with Boris Malenko. He signed up for the Malenko wrestling school before he ended up training at Shawn Michaels' wrestling school. And he put down a deposit, and a few months later they went belly up, and he lost his deposit. So Ken Anderson has now responded to this. He stated, I think this was on his Facebook. Yeah, on his Facebook. And he just said, what do you say? As those dates got pushed forward in the individual correspondence with our students, there was a natural sense of frustration. But each time we expressed our reasons and concerns, we were met with understanding every time from every student. It was our understanding that everyone was on the same page. In hindsight, we recognized that we could have and should have communicated more. So, is Ken Anderson just taking people's money and disappearing into the night? No, but evidently he left at least one student with not enough communication that they thought that might be happening. So I think that's basically all there is to that story. Nothing really else. All right, so let's just check in if there's anything new in the chat. All right, just before we go then for this video, we'll be back tomorrow at 1:30. Impact Wrestling goes tonight. The Bullet Club, Tama Tonga and Tangaloa will make their in-ring debut for Impact. And they will team up with Jay White and Chris Bay. So you got the whole Impact Bullet Club faction. They're going up against Ace Austin, Madman Fulton, Jake Something, and Speedball Mike Bailey. We got Vincent from the Honor No More stable going up against the former Impact World Champion Josh Alexander, who got a shout-out on AEW last night. For the Digital Media Championship, Jordan Grace will defend against Matt Cardona. That should be interesting. This match is not for the ROH Championship, but Jonathan Gresham versus Steve Macklin. Jonah will take on Crazy Steve. John Schuyler will take on Gujar. And Raj Singh will take on Black Taurus. That's on BTI. All right, everyone. That's all the news for this video. We'll be back tomorrow at 1:30. And we've got some new people paying attention to this show. So, thanks very much, everybody. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the like button. And share this video with anyone who you feel would appreciate this type of wrestling coverage. I'm Gentleman Ian for Spoiler Free Wrestling.